Donald Trump is expected to speak again today at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. There's a live look at where this is going to be happening. This is coming just days after that attempt on his life. He's also expected to be officially nominated as a Republican presidential candidate.
Atlanta News First anchor Rick Folbaum joining us now in studio to share what we're learning about how the 20-year-old suspected shooter managed to shoot a former president.
So how could this have happened? An even bigger question now that we're learning that the Secret Service had identified him as a potential threat an hour before any shots were fired. FBI and Secret Service officials briefing members of Congress yesterday. Lawmakers coming out of those briefings saying that the shooter was even spotted with a rangefinder. That's a device that measures distance, basically letting a shooter know how far away an intended target is. He was seen with this twice, 40 minutes and then again 20 minutes before the shooting.
We divided up areas of responsibility, but the Secret Service is solely responsible for the design and the implementation and the execution of the site. And that's what I was trying to stress, was that we just divided up areas of responsibility, and they provided support to those areas of responsibility.
The Secret Service director talking about how local law enforcement helps out when a high-level official comes to town, but that evidently can lead to communications problems or gaps. The shooter's picture was taken by law enforcement, but was it shared among all the agencies involved with securing the event? That's unclear right now. One thing we do know is that investigators were able to search the shooter's phone. They found photos of Donald Trump and also of President Biden and also of Fulton County DA Fani Willis. They also looked at his search history. They saw that he had looked up information on both parties' national conventions, on Mr. Trump's event schedule, along with medical questions regarding depression.
What it's painting is a picture of a disturbed young man, in my view, but still not one that seems to have a clear motive.
President Biden has ordered an independent review of the shooting. So has House Speaker Mike Johnson. He is setting up a task force. This was the most serious attempt to kill a president or presidential candidate since Ronald Reagan in 1981. And getting all the questions answered, guys, will take weeks, if not months.